This is not a drill. This is not a drill. Friendship ended. Friendship ended.
Okay, it may not be as bad as that, but as you can tell, my raspiness is I'm really conflicted. So, the Austrian Grand Prix just ended, and apologies for any spoilers here, but needless to say, we have basically had, I would say, not just an Imola 2021 situation when Hamilton and Verstappen collided, we have basically had, effectively, a Silverstone 2021, between Norris and Verstappen, and what was once clearly a very solid friendship without any issues whatsoever, is probably going to be a little bit more tumultuous on the fact that, basically, Verstappen was taken out of the running for victory after really demonstrating a solid performance in qualifying, and Lando Norris just took himself out entirely, and both men got penalties. I'm not entirely sure about Verstappen getting a 10-second penalty for that one, but then again, it might be just a complete accumulation of all of the stuff that was going on before, but we'll talk about that in a moment. But this is just my immediate thoughts about all of this, because I just had to get up the ladder, because, oh my goodness, this is going back to 2021 in terms of just the scale of it all. I've just seen some pictures of the damage that was sustained, and the rear tire of Norris's is gone, Verstappen's is gone. I think what just made it really, really shocking was that both drivers and both cars sustained damage, and it was a puncture. And sure, it allowed Verstappen to get on the softs, so that means he could go for the fastest lap, but to make matters worse for him, he couldn't even get that. Fernando Alonso, back in the really bad days of McLaren, stole the fastest lap out of nowhere when he was down in 17th. And then, of course, George. Well, okay, we're not going to talk about George right now, but I'll save it for the winners and losers video tomorrow, so be sure to subscribe for that when that drops tomorrow afternoon. I'm in a really tight spot right now. I know, it's a bit of a twofer, actually. I'm British, so there's going to be British bias, but I'm going to try and taper that. But, yeah, my boy, he came second. This is almost justice for yesterday, but either way, I'm pretty sure he's... I'm slightly miffed by that. Oh, I'm so annoyed. That could have been a victory. Oh, He doesn't really get absolutely livid, Oscar, but either way, it was a shame he didn't win. But, second place after all of that just goes to show that whenever Lando tries to aim high and then something happens, misfortune or mistakes, Oscar just comes in quietly and just picks up the pieces and gives McLaren something to be happy about. And now... Oscar's almost on the back of Checo in the points. But then again, George is 1 point behind, but the topic isn't George today, even though he was taking the popcorn from Oscar yesterday in the sprint. But right now, I think this was just going to happen. What this is just going to show you is that, sure, Lando has gained more confidence in terms of being able to pressure Verstappen, but only now is he truly realizing what Lewis Hamilton had to go through throughout the entirety of the 2021 season. That if you are going to try and go after Max Verstappen for a position in anger, don't expect him to yield unless he knows that there is nothing he can do. Yes, of course, his tyres weren't exactly great, and Lando had the opportunity to get past, but put simply, he couldn't do that. And yes, admittedly, Max Verstappen was weaving a little bit more than he should have done, but it wasn't getting absolutely ridiculous where you would know, oh, come on. It was getting iffy, I will admit. That was very, very true. But to be fair, the track limits thing, what they've done with the gravel traps and the sausage curbs, they do work, because I think Lando was the only major person that got affected by track limits after what happened last year, which was ridiculous. But either then, I know turn 3 is his favourite place to try and get a smart overtake, but that was just getting really, really silly. And Max knew that he was in danger. He sounded vulnerable. He sounded hectic. He was not listening to the advice of GP, where otherwise he would have done. But what we got was him having to hound Norris and defend really, really seriously right now, because we all thought yesterday, oh, he was going to wander off into the sunset. And initially he did. We thought he was going to get maybe 10, 15 seconds ahead of the McLaren. But no, we got it kept within 7 seconds. And then after the really shocking pit stop that we got down to within 1.5 seconds. Lando almost got him. The pace in that McLaren was real, and Lando had the potential to get the win. But he couldn't do it. Max is just beyond what Lando can do right now. Because you've got to remember, Verstappen has 3 world championships. He went up against one of the greatest drivers of all time throughout the course of an entire season and ultimately won. I don't want to get into that right now, but over the course of a season, he went up against Lewis Hamilton and he proved to be a worthwhile opponent. And now we're getting into the position where Lando thinks that he can do the same. And as I'm just watching this right now, according to the situation, Lando feels let down by Max Verstappen. I've only just seen the basic headline, but I don't know what to think about that. This just shows you how ad hoc I'm recording this right now. I'm processing my thoughts about this because, yeah, a British driver won, that's nice. An Australian came second place, my favourite driver, that's nice too. Carlos Sainz comes third, which is neat. But either way, we just have to realise here that this was going to happen. We knew that this was going to happen, that Norris and Verstappen were clearly going to be the first and second drivers of the entire season. I don't think Norris would have it in him to go for the world title, but I certainly thought that Lando would have been able to spearhead a potential campaign for McLaren to get to the top of the constructors. But after the sprint and today, this has just shown that Lando has still got plenty of work to do. Max knows exactly what he has to do to stay ahead. And all the people bickering behind him, he can still get the wins and solid results anyway, because he's been through all of that. 3 world championships, 60 plus wins, he's got this, he knows what to do. And Lando's only just starting to figure it out. Now he has a car to be at the front, whereas Max has had this for quite a few years now. Lando has to really figure out what he has to do to try and beat Max, and by saying that he feels let down, sure, there is an agreement between drivers to be fair, but also hard at the same time, and there might have been a bit of frustration from Max's part, sure. I would describe this as just 2 men, really angry, driving hard, a few laps to go, they boiled over, Lando tried something that usually would have worked before or would have been more effective earlier on in the race when the stakes were less high, but it didn't. Max just decided to be a roadblock and not really give Lando proper room. And then Lando just tried to go for it anyway, and then boom, they both get damage, and it was knock for knock effectively. I think it was a 50-50 incident, and yes, Lando got the penalty and Max got a penalty. Again, I thought it should have been 5 seconds maybe, at most, but I think it was just led down to the fact that Lando ultimately got a DNF, and that was down to the damage sustained by Max, and maybe that's what triggered the 10-second penalty. But I do feel like this was going to happen, but I didn't expect it to happen in Austria. And for this to happen at a track where there are so many Max Verstappen fans, and many of those Verstappen fans being Lando Norris well-wishers, I think people are going to be deleting their purchases of the download song from the Pit Stop Boys, Let's Go Lando, Lando is okay, he is one of us. I don't think that the Dutch fans are going to like Lando as much. I think many of them are going to disown him now, and I'm really thinking this is just a reminder, and people on Twitter were discussing this with me throughout the entire race, and then when George, oh my god, I know I'm spitballing right now, but I'm just processing this, I'm just coming down, that friendships in F1 are not sustainable. Charles and Carlos are another good example of this. That's starting to break down since they're not going to be teammates next year anymore, so there's no need to keep up the pretense for the moment. Now, Lando, Max, they've been friends for years, and what did we see with Nico and Lewis? They were friends for years before they got into a car which could win a championship, and then it broke down spectacularly to the point I don't think they really speak to each other anymore. I've seen plenty of videos where Nico's talking, Lewis goes by and completely blanks the guy still. It's been nearly a decade. And if this keeps up, where Lando and Max collide, this is just going to get nasty. And this could get to a point where, sure, Verstappen and Hamilton really duked it out amongst themselves, but they weren't exactly friends before all of this, so there was no love lost almost. And just like that, Fernando gets 2 penalty points for the whole thing with Zhou, which in of itself was bad, but again, I'm going to say that for the winners and losers video. But yeah, this is just showing that, yeah, you can be friends, that's great, but, you know, you got to save that for outside of the track, because this is Max Verstappen we're talking about here. As far as I can tell, right now, minutes after the race is finished, I feel like Verstappen was hounding Norris considerably. Norris snapped, and Verstappen wouldn't yield, and this was just an inevitable racing incident. But ultimately, it was more than that, because they both sustained damage right at a really critical point at the end of the race. Had this been on lap 1 or something, this would have been probably tagged as a racing incident. Both would have sustained a major bit of damage, and then we would have gone from there. Oh my god, I'm bringing up sweat here. Oh man, can you tell how intense that was? I certainly can, and I'm still processing all of this considerably. And I know this is just me garbling, but this is just a sign that, yeah, okay, we are getting ourselves a really exciting 2024 season. Yeah, of course, Max Verstappen is odds on to still get the world title this season, because even though Lando's still second place in the championship, at least I think he is, I haven't done the math right now, Max is still pulling away from all of them because he's still got 10 points. He still managed to bag some points, whereas Lando didn't. Charles Leclerc, I think, didn't either. And yeah, okay, George did, so he's closer. Checo did a little bit, but that's another thing. Verstappen gets a 10-second penalty. He has to come in for a puncture, so it's a long stop. He then had that extra long pit stop, which allowed Lando to close in, and he still finishes ahead of Perez. It's wild. It just goes to show that Max is on a whole other level, and I don't think Max was entirely to blame for the incident. It was something that he did manifest in some extent, but at the same time, Lando was also driving angry. And right now, Max has said in his interview saying, "Of course, from the outside, it's hard to see where I brake. The guy in the car knows best when he's braking. Everyone has their own opinion," which is true. We're not the ones driving the car. So Lando and Max are the ones to know when exactly to brake, and of course there's the telemetry, the stewards have access to it, they have access to the CCTV, so even though sometimes we think the stewards make silly decisions, they do have more intel and information than we do. There's of course all the telemetry the teams have, so they can send that off to the stewards as well, but that won't happen now because, well, the damage has been done. There's been damage done to the McLaren, there's been damage now done to Max Verstappen, so he's not won a race, he's not even on the podium, and now because of what Lando Norris did, it's now completely ruined the McLaren clean sheet. And yes, I'm happy that Lando Norris has gotten his win, and he's now in a car which can go for victories, and he can hustle the likes of Max Verstappen to some extent, but he's still got a lot to learn. He's still making mistakes, and all this is proving is that Oscar Piastri was a worthwhile investment, because he was the one to pick up the pieces and bag some good points, and it just makes you wonder, had he not had that track limits issue, I think he might have won this Grand Prix, and that would have been a really bad situation for Lando. This would have made it even worse. If Oscar Piastri had won the Austrian Grand Prix this year, and this was down to the fact that Lando made a mistake and just leapt forward into Verstappen, when he probably would know that Max wouldn't give up without a fight, he wasn't giving up for about, 70 laps. This would have been even worse if Oscar had won, down to Lando's mistake. And I think there would have been even more question marks going down right now. And just right now, Horner says Lando got his elbows out and it cost both of them. So that's a good point. Lando got his elbows out, Max got his elbows out. They're both young men. They have a point to prove. Max to prove that he's still going after the world championship. He's still the favourite. Lando to prove that he can still get more than one win. He has a car that can do it. He can beat Max. They just want to prove something. And what they proved is that, cars break. That's the thing. Cars break. And they do. And oh my goodness, I don't know what to think of this. Breaking news, chums. This is what the stewards have to say. So he got 2 penalty points, so Max is on 4 penalty points. And it was saying car 1 was approaching turn 3 with car 4 alongside on his left. Before turning in, the driver of car 1 moved to the left, causing a collision with car 4. Sorry if I'm not doing it at home, but the stewards determined that the driver of car 1 was predominantly at fault and therefore imposed the above-mentioned penalty in line with the precedents. Hang on, so approaching turn 3 with car 4 alongside on the left. Before turning in, the driver of car 1 moved to the left. Oh, I see. So basically, what the stewards are saying, the reason why he got the 10-second penalty, Max, was the fact that he didn't keep turning right, he kept turning left to force Lando wide. Well, I mean, at the same time, he was aware about what Lando would do. And as Max said on the radio, I can turn left or right, what do you want me to do? I guess he couldn't turn any more right, because otherwise he would have hit the sausage curb on the inside, or he would have gone into the barrier, so there wasn't really much he could do. And it was a defensive move, but maybe, I don't know. This is something I need to look at more of the footage and get a more detailed analysis of it for tomorrow, because there's plenty to talk about. There's Haas scoring as many points in one race that they did throughout 2023, which is going to make Gunther Steiner seethe and Io Komatsu feel absolutely jubilant. Then, of course, there's Carlos Sainz getting one over Charles Leclerc after what happened in Monaco. There's going to be a lot, so do please subscribe if you want to see all of that, because there's going to be plenty to discuss here. And in the meantime, maybe go and check out this video. My thoughts about the sprint, and why I think maybe George Russell pilfered some of Oscar Piastri's popcorn, which he was cooking. And George, Oscar, George.